Cities in open-world games are probably one of the most crucial components that makes the world of the game believable. It helps to immerse you into the game. Often it is a crucial part of the atmosphere of the game. In this video we will talk about cities in games, what role they play, and what are the types of cities in games, because there are at least 3 types of cities in games. The first type of city that we're going to discuss is a city that does not try to simulate normal city activity. For example, games like Batman Arkham Knight, the city of Gotham. Yes, the whole open world is a big city, but the civilian population of the city is evacuated, so there are no people. Thus, even though the whole open world is a big city, it is hardly different from, for example, the world of Ghost of Tsushima, where there are fields and occasionally some Mongol outposts. The same story is, for example, with the cities from the Last of Us games. Even though they are technically cities, the citizens are gone, so the city is not trying to simulate normal city activities. This kind of city is hardly different from, for example, a dungeon in Skyrim. Yes, the decorations are different, but essentially it serves the same purpose. It is a multi-level, interconnected locations with enemies. That's it. The second type of city is Bethesda/Skyrim/Oblivion type of city. This kind of cities are trying to simulate actual city activities, but fit only for post-apocalyptic and medieval-like cities, primarily because the population of medieval cities were not that great. For example, Chester City in medieval times in England had population of 2,500 people. Yes, for example, Whiterun doesn't have 2,500 NPCs, but you can imagine that the population density is probably closer to the actual medieval cities compared to a modern city. Undoubtedly, Whiterun is too small to be realistic, however it is actually a very good representation of how the city could look like. And the third type of city are cities like in The Witcher 3. And I'm talking about Novigrad, for example. Or an example from GTA 5, City of Los Santos, which is supposed to represent Los Angeles. The main difference between City Type 2 and City Type 3 is primarily the scale and population of the city, but that's primarily. The secondary difference, which comes from Primeval, is that you can't enter every building and talk to every NPC. That's the most important difference between those 2 types of cities. The ability to talk to every NPC in the game and enter every building in the game is very important for the immersion into the game world. That's the world where you can actually explore whatever you want. No boundaries. And then there are cities like Novigrad, a significantly larger city than Whiterun. You can enter majority of the buildings and the city population density is huge. It feels like an actual city. It is much more realistic representation of a medieval city than, for example, Whiterun. However, it is but decorations. The massive population density is nothing but NPCs that have no personality, no backstory, no name, no house assigned to them, etc. They are ever wandering NPCs and the player feels it right away. By the way, that's why I like Oblivion cities more, because you can talk with every NPC, even if it's just to ask for rumors. It feels a lot more realistic than in Skyrim, where there are NPCs that doesn't have the dialogue UI. Now, the story with the city in GTA 5 is as bad as with The Witcher 3. Even worse, because in GTA 5 you can enter a lot less buildings than in The Witcher 3. However, the city in GTA 5 has a significant role in the game. It serves the atmosphere, but about that I will make a separate video on what the hell is atmosphere in games in the first place. Because too many people are talking about atmosphere, but not a lot of people can describe what it is. In general, I make videos on a broad variety of video game topics, so subscribe to the channel and check them out later. Now back to discussion. So, the city of Los Santos and Novigrad visually are very realistic, and are a good representation how those cities must look like. But as I said earlier, the cities are filled with mindless, characterless NPCs and buildings that you can't enter. The primary reason for that is of course the scale of the city. The idea to create this video I've got by seeing one of these videos, with true sizes of cities of Skyrim and Cyrodiil on Unreal Engine 5. They are huge and beautiful, and a lot of people in the comment section are really positive on these cities. How can't you? Again, they are big and beautiful. But the drawback of this type of cities just as with Los Santos and Novigrad, is that they are too big to be anything better than decorations. The simple reason for that is because it is hard to make like 10,000 NPCs with unique personality, quests, voice actors, etc. Just imagine how many lines of dialogues it would take to write. It is impossible. Well, maybe if you develop a game for 40 years, it might be possible, but in practice it is impossible. The same story with buildings. Just to design them all would be a pain in the ass. So we could have something like this in The Elder Scrolls 6, but it would be a city with mindless, characterless husks. I don't want that in Test 6. In my opinion, it is better to have a smaller city, but of a better quality. As I said in one of my videos on the idea of The Elder Scrolls 6, a city twice the size of Whiterun would be nice. And some may say, it doesn't matter that the NPCs are mindless husks. There is no difference. Well, there is. For example, it is not a secret that majority of gamers in RPGs are playing good playthroughs. Statistically, it is objectively true. But there are games where it is easier to play as a bad guy than in others. For example, the gamer playing as Trevor in GTA 5 is committing mass annihilation without a second thought. Or not even as Trevor. Sometimes the player may do the same with any other character, just for fun. But the same player might not be okay with killing the Tieflings in the Grove in Baldur's Gate 3. For example, me. I find it difficult to have a bad playthrough in Baldur's Gate 3. And the reason for that is that the characters in the Grove in Baldur's Gate 3 are NPCs with names, personality and emotions. If you kill them, they stay dead. You can't bring them back. And NPCs from GTA 5, on the other hand, are not like that. If you've killed like 100 NPCs, nothing in the world will change. They are procedurally generated. Your PC will generate more of those. That's why it is easier to commit mass annihilation in GTA 5 rather than in Baldur's Gate. In general, the better the characters are written, the more difficult it is to play as the bad guy. So it does matter if NPCs in cities are good written characters, or if you can enter in every building. It cannot not matter. That's why I would prefer smaller cities in The Elder Scrolls 6, and people who in the comment sections to those videos are asking to have that in the next game, they don't know what they're asking for. No offense to the creator, that's an amazing job he's doing. Now some may ask, so is this the superior way to make a city in games? Well, it depends on what city you are trying to represent. Are you trying to represent a city of 6 millions or a city of 2,500 people? Let's take for example Night City from Cyberpunk 2077. You can't represent Night City even with the city 10 times bigger than Whiterun. You can't represent Night City without having husks NPCs, buildings and floors that you can't enter. Now, some may think that the answer to that issue is procedural generation and AI. And some game developers think the same way. Even though I think procedural generation does a good job creating landscape, I don't think it can do more. And I wouldn't trust AI writing characters and dialogues. I know that AI progressed a lot lately, but I still think it cannot produce art. It can imitate art on command, but to create art, AI is lacking emotions and desires. I'll make a video about if games are a form of art, where I will elaborate on the art topic, so subscribe to the channel if you wanna see it. And leave a generous and glorious like to this video. Now let's summarize it all. There are at least 3 types of cities. First is where a city is just decorations and does not try to recreate real-life city. The second type of city is the city where the city is trying to be as realistic as possible, where all buildings are accessible, every NPC has a name, and is not procedurally generated. The drawback of this type of city is that it can't be massive. The third type of city is a city that is not fully accessible and have procedurally generated NPCs. The drawback of this type of city is that it isn't that immersive, and the player doesn't get emotionally attached. The type of city that you need in a game depends on what you are trying to represent. Even though the second type city is superior to the third, it cannot represent a modern large city, but it can represent a medieval or a post-apocalypse city. Now, thank you for watching. Check out my other videos, like a video about Stalker 2 or about The Witcher 4, or a discussion about The Elder Scrolls 6 and many more. In general, if you got a large rooster, subscribe to the channel.